All right, so I know on my last video I was going to work on my lightning, which I have been, and in doing that I was investigating maps because that was how I was going to get my data for my lightning. And I did the video on maps because I learned a lot looking into those, and one of the main reasons people use maps is for manipulating whole meshes of characters, either by breaking them apart and using all the color data on them, or do some other effect to them. And in watching some videos and investigating that, I realized that in order to do some effects on one of your characters, you really need the whole character to be mapped to one bitmap. Because a lot of times the color map, if you're going to use that, operates on the whole bitmap, and it relies on the bitmap being mapped to the polygons evenly along the whole mesh. And when I was putting together these, I used some of the low poly techniques where you just map all the yellows just to one square of a color palette. And it works well. It works well if all you care about is the character, but it doesn't work if you're going to do any type of effect on your character. And you could see that in my one video where I did the dissolving effect. It does not work well if you don't have the whole mesh map to one bitmap. And I'll show you what I mean. But in this video, what I'm going to do is show you how to use your UV map to break your mesh apart into pieces that you can use and manipulate, and how to fill in those colors. Because when I was looking into how to do this, there's just not a lot out there. I could not find a lot of videos on how to effectively use texture paint and how to effectively unwrap your UV mesh in a way that you could manipulate it easily, both inside a Blender and through an outside graphic program. So I'm going to use this robot model, which I've used in some of my other animation videos. And let's just go in and let's start out by going in, and we'll select all, and we'll go into our UV map and see what it kind of looks like right now. And what it looks like, again, is this low poly. So what I did is all of the yellow polygons are mapped just all on top of each other onto this yellow square. All the gray ones are here, all the black ones are here. And you get, in effect, what the coloring on the robot is, which looks good. I like how it looks, and it worked for my character, but I can't use this UV map for any effects. What I need is all of these polygons spread out along the whole bitmap, and not a bitmap that looks like this, but a bitmap that maps the colors on top of those laid out UV map coordinates. So how am I going to do that? Well, that's what I'm going to do. And so the first thing we do is we say, okay, we have these UV options. We have unwrap, we have smart unwrap. We have a bunch of options here. And if I just do unwrap, what I get is something that's useful. So for example, I just hit L to show all the linked items on the body. The body actually came out pretty good. And I could go in here and I can see all of these items that are kind of all connected pretty well. And I could manipulate that and fill that in with black pretty effectively. But if I look, say if I look at my hand and I hit L for all the linked items, they're all just piled on top of each other. And I couldn't, if I wanted to make, this face something different than this face, it would be difficult to do. So what am I going to do in order to make my unwrap follow what I want, which is I want to unwrap my whole hand out flat. So we'll take a look at how to do that next. So after finding some information on this, I discovered the magic to this are seams. Never really knew what seams were for before. Thought they were just for like smoothing out your different meshes, but that's not really what they're used for at all. They're really used for this UV map to determine how you want the UV unwrap to work. And you can think of it like seams if you were going to, say, make a mitten to cover this hand. It's going to, I want a seam right down this line. So I'm going to hit 2 to go into, vector select mode, and I'm going to hold shift, and I'm just going to select this line here. And I'm going to right click, and I'm going to say mark seam. So now you see we got this red line for the seam. Now if we select everything and we say UV unwrap, we notice that we get this new, what they call islands. So if we go in here, just hit 3, select that guy, Control plus to select all them, you can see that the hand is now been unwrapped into this island. And what I can do is I can manipulate this. I can rotate it as a group, right? I can hit G to grab it, and I can move it up here. And now I have my hand that's now its own separate grouping of UV nodes that I can use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down and I'm going to create a bunch of seams to create islands out of the upper body of my robot to kind of demonstrate what you can do next in order to start creating your bitmap for this. Okay, so I've made some seams here, and I want to show you something because there's a couple things when you do this. One, you have to have a nice clean geometry. When I first started doing my object modeling in Blender, I had some weird, funky faces, and you really can't have that or else your UV maps will just not look good. It'll be all messed up. But putting the seams on in the right places is important too. You have to think of this, the code is going to try to like flatten out or you can imagine it's like a box being unfolded, and you have to tell it where you want that hinge to be, where you want to split it. The seam is kind of where you split it, right? That's where the pieces are coming together. And if you look at this, so I fixed this up. If I select all the things in just this little knee part, you'll see that it unfolded very nicely, and it unfolded right at this point, which if I go into wireframe mode, you can see that this is the hinge point right back here. So this is the seam part. So this is where it came apart, and it flattened it out like it opened it up like a little shell to be flattened, which is what I wanted. Now if we look at this leg part, we can see it's all weird. It's all stretched and weird, and so I made this seam down the leg thinking that it would unwrap, but it can't unwrap because there's connections on the top and connections on the bottom still. So how is it supposed to unfold? It really can't. So you got to think of your seams that way, and obviously it takes practice, and this is probably only the third time I've done this, so it takes me a bit of practice too before you kind of understand where to make your seams. So let's fix up this leg to get him unwrapped better. So I created a bunch more seams here to try to unwrap, but it's very complicated because this has a lot of different faces and facets, and getting it to unwrap well is kind of tricky, and whether it makes a difference or not is up to you. Whether it depends on how much you want to manipulate it. If it's all just going to be one color, it really doesn't matter because as you'll see when we go to fill this in, it's pretty easy to fill in a separate island. But if we go in here and we go to solid, pick this guy and hit link, we can see that it unwrapped pretty well. One other thing you can do to simplify it is to break it into pieces. And if we go into wireframe mode and I go in and I'll hold down Alt, select this guy. Oops. I need to be in edge mode. Select that edge, mark this seam. So now what you see is you have a complete circle. And what it will do is it will make this item up here a separate island from this down here. So now if we do all, we go to UV, unwrap, we go select this face, Control plus to select this guy. You'll see that this island up here is separate from this down here. Because now as we add in this bottom part, the bottom part below the seam, we can see it is now down here. And so what we have is we have one island for everything below that fully enclosed seam and another island up here, actually two islands, that we can use and move around and operate on separately. So that is another way to do it. You can split up your mesh into as many pieces as you want and as many islands as you want, depending on your needs for either filling or coloring or manipulating into another program. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to complete all these seams. Now one thing is I am in mirror mode. You'll see that my object's in mirror mode. So all of my seams here are being done here. So before you apply that mirror, you're going to want to set up all your seams, assuming that it's a symmetrical and you use mirror mode, which I highly recommend if you're making any type of players. They typically are symmetrical, and the mirror mode is very handy for that. So yeah, so make all your seams, get all this going first, and then I'm going to apply that mirror. So I'm going to do that next so we can see how to start filling these things in with color. All right, so I got all my seams made, got a little bit better at it. Really, all I was thinking of is outlining everything I wanted except one item where I kind of wanted the fold to be. And then I imagined my items unfolding from that hinge point. So that made some nice, clean items. You can see that this is my one arm. He unfolded the back, the top, the front, the bottom quite nicely if you do a lot of those seams correctly. So the next question is we don't want to use this bitmap. So what we're going to need to do is make a new material out of this. So let's go to our solid. Remember, our head is separate. We're just working on the body here. And what I can do is if I go here to my materials, you'll see right now it's assigned to this low poly. What I can do is I can make a new one. Let's make a new material. Let's call it robot body. And we are going to assign that to the whole item. And so you'll see it's just white because I haven't defined the material yet. So I come in here and I come to my base color. I'm going to want this to be an image texture. And I don't have one that I made, so I can actually click new. So I'll just make it 1024 by 1024. I'll say okay, it's going to be black. So now it made a nice new black material for me. And you'll see my body is all black because it is now mapped to this one items. And again, what I can do is I can move things around. I can resize them as I want on this bitmap. So if I want to make some better space, and there is packages, I believe, that will do this for you. But I can grab that, move it up. I can move things around however I want to arrange them. But I can also save this out as a new image. So if I do save as, and I can name it, and then what I can do is after I create this bitmap, I can actually go into an outside editor program. This is being a pain. Robot body. And I can save it as an image. And then I can come in here, and I'm going to do this after, is I'm going to open this in an outside editor, and I can actually draw on it with an outside editor to get whatever details I want onto that bitmap. So what I'm going to do is, the next thing I want to do is I want to draw on this. And there's a couple ways of doing that. One way to do is I can go into texture paint. Well, I'm going to go into texture paint and use that for manipulating my bitmap. But what I can do is I can just go in here and I can use my paintbrush, and I can go in and I'll select, actually I want this gray for my hand, and I can actually draw on this, and it will actually draw on, you'll see as soon as I let go, it actually drew on my bitmap here exactly where I wanted it to be, where the UV map was. But that can be kind of tricky because what happens when I get kind of close here is that how am I gonna, I want to draw on this, and it's kind of a hassle, and I just went a little bit onto the arm, and I really don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to use the fill bucket. Whoops. Back into texture paint. I want to use this fill bucket. So I can do fill, and then I can select my color, gray, but I just want to fill the hand. So how do I do that? If I click on this, you'll notice that it filled the whole thing. Oops, I picked red. It filled my whole image, and that's not what I wanted. I just wanted to fill the hand. So how do you mask off the rest of the body and just select the hand? So let's undo this. So let's go into UV editing mode. You can go into modeling mode. It doesn't matter. I'm going to select my hand, click link. So I'm going to have just the hand selected. Now I'm going to go back into texture paint. I'm going to click on this little button here, paint mask. Face selection, masking for painting. So I select this little guy. Now I pick my color. I'm going to pick, kind of a gray here. Now when I click fill, it's just going to fill my hand. So now I can go back into UV editing. I can select this guy, link. I can go back into texture paint. This is still selected, so now you'll see everything else is masked off except what I want to fill, and I'm going to pick a yellow color here instead. Full brightness. And so now I've just filled my hand. So you can see in this way I can go through and I can mask off, I can select each item and mask off the rest and use the fill in order to get my base colors there. So if I wanted to do, so I got this guy for reference, so I want to do one of these black bands here. So if I select the band, I hold down Alt, hold down Alt. If I click on this edge, it's going to pick this band there. Again, I can go back into texture paint. Just the band is selected. I can go in here. I can drag this all the way down to black. Do fill. And now you'll see it just filled in my UV map on that band. So you can see that way I can go through and I can build my bitmap by banding off things, masking off them, and using the fill in order to do that. Now you'll notice that I'm using link a lot, and it's a good idea when drawing your items to draw each mesh individually. So you can use L when selecting, again, very handy, both for assigning your armatures, for doing this mask painting, everything. Being able to select things by those linked items makes it a lot easier than having to go in and select all your faces by hand. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to build my whole bitmap. And then what I'm going to do is we're going to go into, and we can open this bitmap up now that it's saved out to disk, and I can actually draw on it with another drawing program. So let's see how we can do that next to add a little bit of detail onto our character. All right, so I've added all of my seams on my body. What I also did is I made a seam around this center part because I'm going to want to know where that is on my bitmap, because when we open it up in my bitmap editor, I'm going to want to add something to it to show how you can modify the image that your player uses in a separate program. And so I did that. So that will be its own little island. And what I also did is I need to join this head. This head was a different object, and I really need the whole robot to be one big mesh. And so I joined that together with the rest of it. And if we go in now, you'll see it's all part of one object. And one thing I did, and I added a seam down the middle here, and then I did a seam around the eye, and it will be mirrored to this eye because the mirror is still on. You can see this mirror is on. And so once I make the seams, what I want to do is I want to take this mirror off. If I have this mirror on when I go to unwrap, it will work, but what it will do is both sides of this head will be right on top of each other. And if I wanted to modify, like I was thinking of, put a number on here or something on his head, then what would happen is it would be mirrored on the both sides. So I couldn't really do that. So what you're going to want to do is after you make all your seams, we'll just undo this mirror. And really what you can do is I'll select this, select L to select them all. And I just click this little drop down and click apply. Oops, I need to be in object mode in order to apply it. So I'll click apply, and now when we're back in here, see I can select both sides. So now the mirror is off, which is what I want to before I do my UV unmap. So the other issue is that this is still mapped to my old material, and so what I want to do is I want to select that. Select link, L for link. So I've selected all of my head. I go into my materials. I just want to select my robot body 01 and I want to click assign. Now you can see it just turned black, which is good. That's what I wanted. So now I can hit A for all. I will do unwrap, and now it has created all of my items unwrapped. You'll see that I made the bitmap a little bit bigger. I made it 1536 by 1536. I like to keep it powers of 2 because it will compress better when you bring it into Unity. If you've ever seen, there's a little message that says that in order to use compression, it needs to be a power of 2 size. So what I need to do is I need to move some of this around a little bit. Oops. Because you'll see that these are overlapped. And a handy way of doing it, if I selected this item, if I hit L here, it will select all the linked items. Hold down the shift key, select this, hit L, Now I hit G for grab, just like I would move anything around in my model editor. So I can move him off of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift some things around. I'm also going to rotate this image. Let's see where he's at. Oops. Select all these guys. Oop, he's way down there. So I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to rotate this guy. So if I select him, I hit L, I hit R for rotate, and then I'm going to want to rotate it. So then when I'm looking at my bitmap in my graphic editor, I can see exactly what I'm doing. It's orientated upright, just like it's going to be on my robot. So I can draw on it easier and have it appear correctly. So I'll go off, I'll shift this around, get it all fixed up, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill all my colors in, just like I showed and demonstrated on that arm, but I'm going to do it for all the objects across my entire robot, and it will fill in all my colors in my bitmap. And then I'll show how we can save that and bring it into another editor, draw on it, and you can see that those images will then be on my robot. So I'll work on that next. All right, so I've finished all my texture painting. It took a little bit of work. I don't know if you noticed when I was working on my joining of my head and showing how I could apply that mirroring. What happened is my body was already mirrored, and when I joined the head and unmirrored this, it duplicated my body, unfortunately. So I had to go back and redo a bunch of stuff. The other thing is that as I was doing my unwrapping, I noticed there was still a few odd items in there, and I found there was a few overlapping polygons in my mesh. And so getting a nice clean mesh and going back and fixing those up is important. So I fixed those up, got my head joined, got all my items filled in the way I had showed in the previous step. And you can see that I changed around the seams a little bit when I redid it. And if we look at our texture paint, we can see this is the resulting bitmap. If I just select all, you can see I probably should have made the background a different color than black, because what I had to do is I had to fill in, I want to draw on this items, because I want to make a graphic appear on the front of his chest here. And when it was black, I wouldn't be able to see it when I bring it into another editor. So I colored it gray. It's just a temporary thing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take this bitmap and save it. So if we go into image here and just click save, we will save it to, I have the same directory as I have my mesh. I just saved it to that directory. And now what we're going to do is I'm going to open it in another program. And I just started using this program. I had been using GIMP and a couple other programs. This Krita actually works really nice for doing more drawing. GIMP is better at doing manipulation of images, but it really doesn't. It's a bit harder to get what you want through drawing. This Krita really works well. It's also an open source program. I'd seen it used in a couple other videos, so I decided to download and try it. And I'm not an expert in it. I just started, but it is pretty easy to use and works pretty well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go open, and this is just a PNG. It's nothing special about it. So when I open it, so this is the bitmap that's being used to map all of my textures. And you can see here's my gray item from the chest. And so what I'm going to do is going to come over here, and I'm going to create a couple of, or actually create one new layer, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, and I don't want to draw directly on the bitmap. I suggest anytime you're doing drawing, always make other layers so you really don't mess up your original bitmap. And when you save it, it will compress all your layers down when you go to save it. So what I'm going to do is just come in here, select red just for a different color. I'm not an artist, so it's not going to be anything fancy. Just going to draw a circle here about that size. Going to come over here. I'm going to copy the layer. I'm going to paste it to 2 more layers. Then I'm going to come into one of my other layers, coming over here. I'm going to move, because all the circles were just right on top of each other. Move that layer like that. Uncheck this guy. I want that uncheck. Here we go. Then I'm going to move this layer 3 to get a nice pattern here, just kind of a circular pattern. And if I check all the layers, then move, they will all move together. It's kind of handy. So I'm just going to center it there. Now I'm going to go back to my first layer. It's like these guys. I'm going to come pick black again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this back in with black. Then we're going to save it. Yep, that looks okay. Let's minimize this guy. I believe there is a refresh. Reload. So I reload it. So now what we see is we see our modifications to our bitmap. I see our little colors there. Come over here, go back into model view. Oops. Oh, I'm still in texture paint. And we can see our drawing. So in this way, you can add items to your character without going in. You can go into texture paint. You really can't do it. Has no decent fancy tools for doing a nicer drawing. So this shows a way that you can add to your character, get some other fancier looking graphics onto it easily using any drawing program that you want. But again, once it's mapped to that bitmap. So what we've seen is we can add those seams. And again, the more you do it, the better you get at it. Again, I think of it like unfolding a cardboard box and cutting all the items that will let me unfold that mesh flat. And so you got to leave yourself a seam or one item that's not a seam in order to act as your hinge, kind of how I think about it. But hope you try it out and make your own image bitmap to map onto your character. And so now that I have my character and I have it all mapped to one image, I can now manipulate it better in Unity. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this character and work on that to see if I can do some cool particle effects on this mesh. So stay tuned for that one, and thanks for watching.